Hey book lovers, Kaylee here. Welcome back to the Enchanted Library. As you can probably tell from my bookshelves behind me, there are some books missing, and that is because I took them off my shelves so then that way I could talk to you about them, because I thought today I would do 15 of some of my favorite rereads. Now, I am one of those readers that rereads constantly, so I have many books that are not included on this list that I've reread, but each of the books that I'm going to talk about today are books that I have reread at least twice and still absolutely adore them and will still continue to reread them in the years to come because I love them so much. Another reason that I thought I would do this video today is because it is cozy weather time, and I feel like that is a really great time just to curl up with a book, like always, and re-enter worlds that you love, kind of like a warm hug. So I couldn't narrow it down to 10, so that is why I have 15, and I will get into those now. The first book I just grabbed here is just because it was on top of the pile, so there is no particular order, but this particular series, so this is book 1, but I am going to say it's really for the whole series for any of these books, but it is The 100 by Cass Morgan. So there was a really interesting thing about this series because it was published in the same year that they sold the rights to the television show. So as this book came out, the TV show was also coming out, but they are two totally different entities. But I find myself that any time that there's a hiatus in a season or what have you for the show, I have to reread this entire series because I just absolutely love the characters. I love the story. It's not often that I can find a sci-fi that I really, really love, but this is definitely one of them, and I think it's just because of the rooted characters that are within it. So if you have not picked this up but you are a fan of the television show The 100, I feel like there are things that happen in this book that will satisfy you beyond the show, but the show is also a great companion because it has just extended leaps and bounds to where this series was, because this series only has 4 books in it, but the show is continuing on, and my mind is just blown with the show right now. But these books are always great to come back to when I want to sort of relive the core storyline of the 100, basically. So I just love returning to this world and reading about Bellamy and Clark and Octavia and just the entire team. I absolutely love it. The next book that I have here is one that I read earlier this year for the first time, but I have already reread it a couple of times because I just love this type of writing, and that is Catching Stars by Kayla Keenan. I've talked about this book a couple of times, but honestly, it is just a great adventure story. I love fantasy, I love adventure stories where you have a group of people, no matter what size, 2 people, 10 people, whatever, and everybody is on the same journey to get to an end game, but they keep getting sort of sidetracked and having quests being thrown on them, and then they get split up and brought back together, and it's just, I love that writing style and I love that trope. So a book like this is perfect for me, and the way that the adventure narrative was written is just, I love it so, so much. So I've definitely already returned to this book, even though I read it, like I said, just earlier this year, but it is one that I'm going to for sure continue to reread, and I'm gonna have to reread it a couple more times before the second book in the series comes out next year, so I'm so amped for that, you have no idea. Now let's pop over to a Canadian classic, which again I have spoken about a few times on here, but that is Anne of Green Gables by Ella Montgomery. And this, like I said, is a Canadian classic, so every Canadian I feel like has to have read this book. And Gilbert Blythe is just my everything. I love him so, so much. And just this entire story is just so heartwarming, and it really is like being welcomed home. I absolutely adore this entire journey that Anne takes throughout her life because it's really just a slice of life type of book. It's not fantasy, it's not anything crazy, it's just life in Canada on PEI. And I love this book so much, this entire series, and it is one that I definitely come back to, and you can probably tell because it is quite ratty, and probably one of the more ratty books that I own because I've just been rereading this so many times. And switching things up to a contemporary, I've Got Your Number by Sophie Kinsella. Now, Sophie Kinsella is definitely one of my go-to reads for contemporary. I don't have many of them because it's not really a genre that I stick to very often, but her stories are always so fun. You've always got a romance, you've always got jokes, and you have something having to do with like business subterfuge, I find, in most of her stuff, which is just a happy little addition. Even though it is a contemporary and you can't really find much new within a contemporary after you read it the first time, it's still great to come back to and relive those moments and have the journey with the characters because it is just so fun. I absolutely love this storyline. If you don't know what I've Got Your Number is about, it's basically a woman who is at her sort of engagement party brunch thing with her girlfriends and she loses her engagement ring. So through an unfortunate series of events, she also loses her phone and picks up one that she finds, and she basically adopts the life of that phone because it belongs to an assistant to a businessman. So it's just, it's so fun. I really want to reread this already, and I've read it maybe twice this year so far, and it's just fun to come back to. And then popping over to YA, I have a book here that I haven't reread in probably a couple of years, but I do still like to reread it, and I have reread it a few times, and I'm probably due for a reread. I feel like we should have a tally over how many times I say reread. But that book is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, and I feel like obviously so many people have read this book. It is old news in the booktube community, in the book community, because it is celebrating, I believe its 10-year anniversary this year, which is amazing but also mind-boggling because I can't believe that this came out 10 years ago. I would have been 20 years old. That's insane. But this was sort of a juggernaut of a book, and I needed to go back to it multiple times, and like I said before, I still enjoy going back to it even though it's been a while, and sort of figuring out little hints and things that were mentioned in this book that sort of not necessarily come to pass, but have payoff in the last book, and then you just relive those character moments, and it's such a good story. And yeah, just the fact of how big of a deal this book series was when it came out, I just feel like this is a necessary reread because there are so many things still that you can catch in this series. Now let's pop over to a classic, and this book I have reread so many times. It's a classic, and I have the pocket edition of it. I don't know if you can really tell what it is, but it's Pride and Prejudice, and that is obviously by Jane Austen. And I love so many Jane Austen books, and I reread so many Jane Austen books, but this one is the quintessential, and I know that this is pretty much everybody's go-to, but it is for a reason because Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy, they are amazing. And I know that you could write so many different dissertations and whatnot on these two characters and how they aren't a match, how they are a match. It doesn't matter because the story is just amazing and I love going back to it. And the fact that when I read this I didn't fully understand it because I was so young, I just love every year being able to go back to it and learning something new from it. And I have been reading this book pretty much every year since I was, 11, 12? It's been a long time and I still adore it. Let's pop back over to YA, to a very recent read, because this book just came out in August, but I've already reread it 3 times because I'm trash for it, so I couldn't not include it in this video because that would just be lying to myself. But the book is These Rebel Waves by Sarah Rosh, and the ending of this book was just amazing, and I am so excited to see what happens next, but I hate that I have to wait until August next year until it comes out because I am just dying to figure out what happens next and how my characters are doing and what life is going to be like for them after the events of the end, and I need to calm myself down because I just get so excited with this book. I just want to relive the events that happen in this story. I want to be a stream raider. It's so good. Another one here is a childhood classic, and that is The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. And I feel like not enough people talk about this series anymore. I know that it's old news, but it is still brilliant, and I really hope that if Netflix, I think it's been confirmed that Netflix is making this into a series, but if they do it, I just want them to do it right. I don't think that the films were that poorly done. I really enjoyed the first one, and I feel like it just got the magic across really well. But if they do a series, like an actual honest to goodness series that spans years, I feel like it's just going to be the perfect medium for this story. I wish that I had every version of this story because I love it so much, and I love Susan. Susan is definitely my favorite, but I feel like she got shafted because there is a history with C.S. Lewis and what happened and why she got shafted in the end, and so I just have like imagination running wild about what alternative endings there could have been. And this next book I was gonna save until last, but I mean it's right here on the next in the pile, so I figured I might as well talk about it now. And it's not gonna be to anybody's surprise, I don't think, if you've been following my channel this year. But that is Poison Study by Maria V. Snyder, and I am a fangirl of Maria V. Snyder so much, and this is probably the book that I have reread the most, next to one other, but I feel like this is starting to surpass it because I can't get enough of Yelena and Valak and their journey, and this entire series I have reread multiple times, so this had to be included. It is one of my favorite books of all time, and I just keep coming back to it, and I've even gone so far as to try and write a screenplay for it, but I don't think that is going very well because there's too much detail that I want to include, so I fully understand now why screenplay writers have it so hard and why you can't sort of make everybody happy even though you try so hard. But this book, if I could make a movie adaptation of it that was so true to form and had no time limit needed, oh, I'd be so happy. I'd be so happy. And naturally I would want to play Yelena because she's a badass, and I love it so much. And again, because I'm a Maria V. Snyder fangirl, I had to also choose Touch of Power because this is another series that she wrote that I absolutely love. And along with Poison Study and Touch of Power, these are also really good adventure books. This has the adventure narrative down pat, and particularly with this story, it's great in a group environment, being on a journey and having their adventures, because she just does it so well, and she gives each of the characters their due, and they each have their own individual personalities, and it's just so good. And there's so many, like, even though it's politics in this story, there is just so much action and adventure and magic, and I love it so much. But yes, I reread this one constantly too. I actually want to reread it again, even though I've already reread it once this year. The next book that I have here I would consider kind of fairy tale-esque, but I adore it so much, and that is Stardust by Neil Gaiman. And I absolutely love this edition because it is like the cloth-bound hardcover, and it's just got the metallic in the front, and I love it so much. I could stare at it constantly, and that's why I have it facing out on my shelves all the time, because it's just so beautiful. I think the only thing that would make this edition better is if they bronzed the edges of the paper as well, so then that way it matched with the metallic up front. I think that would just have been spot on, but they didn't ask me my opinion when they made this edition, but I mean, they were close. They made it beautiful. Anyway, I reread this book. I have reread this book a couple of times, and it still is enchanting to me. I absolutely adore the story, and I always find it so enjoyable because there are so many different elements to the plot that sort of converge really well that it's just so great. And the movie actually is really good too of its own right. It's a really fun adventure movie, but the book, if you haven't read it, please do yourself a favor and read it. The next one that I have is actually one that isn't the best to reread because it is so massive, but this series is one of my favorite fantasy series of all time, and if I didn't reread it at least a few times, I feel like I would just be lying to myself. And that is the Sword of Truth series by Terry Goodkind. The first book in it is Wizard's First Rule, and Richard Seifer and Kaylin M. Nell are amazing. I love their story so much. I love just being in the Midlands, and I just keep saying because I can't even comprehend or speak the way that I want to with how much I love this series and everything that happens in it. Like, you wouldn't think that someone could write this much and still have it be so fresh and so good. But I mean, well, I guess I have not read Brandon Sanderson yet, but I want to, and I feel like that's probably the closest. But this series is amazing. It is one of the first massive fantasy series that I ever read, and I feel like that is one reason that it sits so well with me. 3 more books to go, and the third last here is Little Women, and that is by Louisa May Alcott, and this is a classic, as you are probably all aware about the March sisters. And again, it's basically just slice of life. I love historical fiction, and this book I read when I was 10 or 11, I think, and it's just has stuck with me forever, and I like to go back to it because, again, it's just like visiting old friends and having great conversations with them. It's just precious to me. I love it so, so much, and I wish that I could get like every edition possible of this book because I think that each edition is beautiful, and I just don't have the space for it, unfortunately. But this is one of those books that you read when you're younger, you read when you're older, and I feel like it just gives you a new perspective every single time that you read it, no matter what age you are. So this is one that I'm going to continue to reread 100% because you can't stop learning from this book, and you can't stop enjoying it. Second last book here is Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare, and I will say that the Infernal Devices trilogy I prefer to The Mortal Instruments, because this has elements that I love so much, including steampunk and Shadowhunter, badass characters, old Victorian London. It's got so many things that I love. And one of the surprising things about this series that I actually really do like is the love triangle, because it's the only love triangle that I've seen done right. And I don't know how better to explain that without giving spoilers, but every time that I reread this series, I still fall more and more in love with it. And the last book in the series, no matter how many times I read it, that epilogue, I'm bawling my eyes out and my shirt is tear-stained and I can't get enough of it. But I still reread it because I just love the story so much. So this is definitely one that I reread constantly, and I just love going back to it. And these covers are beautiful, and Will is, I know I said Gilbert Blythe is my everything, but Will is also my everything, and I'm okay with that. And the last book of my rereads is, again, probably going to be no surprise, but it is Harry Potter by the one and only, the Queen, J.K. Rowling. What is there not to love about Harry Potter? I don't know. There's magic. There is always the underlying story and the underlying message of love and what that means. And this book series just makes you believe that magic is real. And I can't even begin to really explain what this series means to me and everything that I feel about it, because it's such an era of literature with this series that it fails in comparison to so many others that you can't even begin to describe it. This book, you just have to read it. If you haven't read it yet, if you are just beginning to read and just beginning your journey of learning what type of books you enjoy, this is one that you need to pick up because it is social. Like, everybody knows Harry Potter. I feel like everybody knows what their Hogwarts house is. It's loving. It's just inclusive in general. And the community that is surrounding the Harry Potter world, let alone the Harry Potter books and what's within it, is just such a nice, warm, welcoming place that when you reread the books, you just feel that love. You feel that welcome, like a hug and like you're being welcomed home. I'm getting like super mushy at the end of this now, and I didn't mean to, so I'm gonna stop. But yeah, Harry Potter, definitely a reread that I love to return to. Alright, so those are 15 books that I have reread multiple times and will continue to reread, and I would love to know what books either in this stack or of your own that you love to reread. So please leave a comment down below letting me know. And don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel for more content. I put out new videos every weekend, and until next time, keep reading.